Systems fail, alarms blare, everyone panics, until the janitor's surprising skills save the day. Elizabeth Harper strode through the polished corridors of Harper & Co. Bank, her tailored navy blazer hugging her frame perfectly, heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. At 42, she carried herself with an authority that demanded attention, every step measured, every glance commanding respect. Her office, perched on the 20th floor, overlooked the bustling city streets below, a constant reminder of the empire she had built from sheer determination and sharp instincts. The late morning sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the lobby, catching on the sleek metallic surfaces and casting elongated reflections across the gleaming floors. Employees hustled back and forth, phones ringing, keyboards clattering, and the faint aroma of espresso drifting from the corner cafe blending with the crisp scent of polished wood and leather-bound ledgers. Elizabeth moved through it all with practiced ease, her eyes scanning each interaction, each transaction, every little detail that might indicate a misstep in her carefully orchestrated operation. As she reached her office, Elizabeth's attention flickered to the large monitor on her desk. A faint warning blinked in the corner, a subtle, almost innocuous alert that something was amiss. She frowned, leaning closer. The screen displayed lines of code and system processes she normally trusted implicitly. But today, a ripple of unease stirred within her chest. Something wasn't right. The alert wasn't alarming in itself, yet her instincts, honed over decades of navigating financial crises, whispered that this small anomaly could escalate quickly if left unchecked. Around her, the staff carried on, oblivious to the faint tremor of tension that had begun to grip their leader. Elizabeth's assistant, Marcy, passed by carrying a stack of client files, smiling brightly. "Everything's on track for the morning reports, Elizabeth," she said cheerfully. Elizabeth nodded absently, still focused on the screen, feeling a tightening in her chest. She could hear the faint hum of the servers, the rhythmic tapping of keyboards, and the low murmur of customer conversations. Every sound seemed amplified, a background orchestra to the subtle unease curling inside her. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, fingers poised, not yet typing. Elizabeth prided herself on staying calm under pressure, but a flicker of tension shadowed her usually serene expression. Something about the message, its vagueness, its unpredictability, made her pause. Should she call IT immediately? Or wait, assess further? The room's brightness, the sun streaming across the glass walls, did little to soothe the gnawing worry. She inhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus, every muscle in her body alert, ready for action. And then she noticed it, a minor delay in the transaction logs, a fraction of a second longer than usual. To anyone else, it would have been imperceptible. To Elizabeth, it was a red flag flashing urgently in the calm of the morning. Her brows knitted tightly as a low hum of anticipation built inside her, a quiet prelude to what could become a storm. The staff remained unaware, going about their business, while she, Elizabeth Harper, felt the first prickling of panic stir under her composed exterior. Something big was about to happen, and she could sense it before anyone else. The sudden shrill of alarms pierced the polished tranquility of Harper & Co.'s Bank. Screens across the office blinked erratically, then went completely black. Transaction logs froze mid-process, customer accounts inaccessible, and the rhythmic hum of the servers became a frantic, staccato warning. Panic rippled through the staff like a shockwave. Phones rang endlessly, terminals remained unresponsive, and the once bustling lobby filled with murmurs of confusion. Elizabeth Harper's heart thudded violently in her chest. She moved swiftly between the frozen workstations, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor, eyes darting over frozen monitors. Someone get it now!" she barked, her usual calm authority fractured by the chaos around her. Her voice, firm moments ago, now trembled slightly with urgency. She glanced at a cluster of employees huddled near the central console, their faces pale, hands hovering helplessly above unresponsive keyboards. "Why isn't anyone responding?" "This can't be happening!" Elizabeth exclaimed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair, already slightly disheveled from the tension. Sweat beaded at her temples as she tried to process the magnitude of the system crash. For the first time in years, the meticulous order of her domain seemed completely out of reach. Her confident stride faltered. Her commanding presence, usually enough to quell minor emergencies, was now swallowed by the enormity of the crisis. Clients at the front desks began to murmur, some raising voices, frustration etched across their faces. "My account! I can't access my funds," one shouted. Another, a sharply dressed businessman, tapped his foot impatiently, glaring at Elizabeth. The polished, professional environment of the bank, the reassuring hum of computers, the clatter of keyboards, the murmur of diligent employees, had transformed into a storm of uncertainty. Each sound, from the beeping alarms to the chatter of anxious customers, seemed magnified in Elizabeth's mind, a cacophony highlighting her growing panic. Internally, a torrent of fear and doubt surged. Thoughts raced through her mind. How could this happen under my watch? What if transactions are lost? What if clients blame me? Her normally unshakable composure wavered, and a cold knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a terminal, hoping desperately that a simple reboot could restore order. But the screens remained black, unyielding. Around her, employees whispered nervously to each other. "Who's going to fix this?" one asked, voice quivering. "Does the CEO know what to do?" murmured another. Every gaze seemed to pierce her, magnifying the crushing pressure. Elizabeth's breathing grew shallow, her jaw tightening as she tried to ground herself, to remember the calm decisiveness that had earned her respect and authority for years. Yet each frozen screen, each panicked client, each alarm beeping insistently, chipped away at that facade. She paused at the center of the main floor, scanning the chaos. Her mind oscillated between solutions and worst-case scenarios. What if we lose crucial client data? What if this destroys trust in the bank? Anxiety twisted her insides as she ran her hands over the edge of the central desk, grounding herself with the smooth coolness of polished wood, but it offered little comfort. Time stretched uncomfortably. Every second without resolution intensified the tension. The staff looked to her for guidance. Clients expected decisive action. And yet, despite her intellect and experience, Elizabeth felt the walls of control closing in. Her authoritative mask slipped, revealing the raw fear beneath. The bank's lobby, once a temple of efficiency and confidence, now felt like a cage, every echoing alarm. Every frozen screen a reminder that the order she depended on could unravel in an instant. And just as she prepared to call the IT director herself, a subtle movement at the far end of the room caught her attention, a figure pushing a cleaning cart, unnoticed by everyone else. Elizabeth's gaze narrowed, curiosity flickering amid the panic. Could anyone here possibly help restore the chaos, or would the crisis spiral further out of control?
Chaos had taken full hold of Harper & Co. Bank. IT staff darted between terminals, keyboards clattering as they attempted futile resets and emergency protocols. Screens flickered intermittently, yet the system stubbornly refused to cooperate. Elizabeth's frustration grew with each passing minute. Her sharp heels clicked rapidly against the marble floor as she paced the lobby, wiping beads of sweat from her brow. The sun streamed harshly through the glass walls, intensifying the heat, adding to the stifling atmosphere of tension. Her chest tightened, her heartbeat thundered against her ribcage. She ran through possible solutions, none of them quick enough. Customers had begun losing patience. Some huffed loudly, tapping impatiently on the counters, while others grabbed their belongings and stormed out in anger. Whispers of blame and frustration rippled through the crowd. Elizabeth's normally unshakable composure was strained to the limit. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios, lost client trust, financial discrepancies, ruined reputations. She muttered under her breath, the words almost swallowed by the cacophony of panicked voices. "I can't believe this is happening. Everything depends on this system." Her fingers clenched into fists, the polished nails digging into her palms as she struggled to maintain control over the spiraling chaos. In a quiet corner near the supply closet, Malcolm Johnson moved his mop slowly, observing the storm of panic around him. At 50 years old, he bore the calm of a man who had faced countless challenges in life and survived with dignity. His uniform slightly faded, but meticulously clean stood in contrast to the frenzy of activity around him. He had been a janitor at the bank for over 2 decades, known for his quiet efficiency, but invisible to most of the staff, including Elizabeth. Today, however, he was more than just a bystander. There was a weight of understanding in his eyes as he surveyed the malfunctioning systems and the tense employees. Elizabeth's pacing brought her closer to him, though she barely registered his presence. She muttered again, voice tight with desperation, "Everything. It's all falling apart. I can't let this happen." The words trembled with the raw vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. Malcolm straightened, leaning lightly on his mop. His voice was calm, steady, and authoritative in a way that contrasted sharply with the frantic energy of the lobby. "Maybe I can help, ma'am," he said. The simplicity of the offer cut through the panic like a knife, drawing Elizabeth's attention immediately. She froze mid-step, turning slowly toward him, eyes wide with disbelief. Her mind resisted the idea of a janitor solving the crisis seemed absurd, but desperation tempered her skepticism. "Excuse me," she said, a hint of incredulity in her tone. Her lips parted, almost searching for the right words to question the statement without sounding dismissive. "I said, maybe I can help," Malcolm repeated, his gaze unwavering. There was no arrogance in his voice, only quiet confidence. He gestured toward the central server area, a faint spark of certainty in his calm demeanor. Something about the way he stood, the deliberate patience in his posture, hinted that he knew more than he let on. Elizabeth's mind raced. Her initial disbelief battled with mounting desperation. Could it be possible? Could this unassuming man, overlooked 4 years, truly have the knowledge to resolve a crisis that the trained IT staff couldn't? The thought seemed ridiculous, but the situation left her with few alternatives. She swallowed hard, nodding slightly, her hands still trembling. Around them, the tension of the lobby remained thick. Employees continued to mutter anxiously, screens flickering with stubborn defiance, and customers shifted impatiently. Yet, in that moment, Elizabeth's focus narrowed entirely on Malcolm, the quiet janitor who dared to speak in the midst of chaos. His calm presence was a stark contrast to the pandemonium, a beacon of unexpected hope. "All right," she said finally, voice cautious, but tinged with hope. Show me what you can do." Malcolm gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. The quiet confidence in his eyes suggested that this moment, unnoticed by the rest of the world, was about to shift everything. The lobby, once alive with panic, seemed to pause, as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting to see what the unassuming janitor would do next. Malcolm knelt before the central server cabinet, his hands steady and precise, moving with a confidence that belied his role as a janitor. The panel hissed slightly as he opened it, revealing a maze of wires, blinking lights, and small circuits. The hum of electricity and whirring fans filled the air, accompanied by the occasional beep signaling error messages still unresolved. Elizabeth hovered nearby, tense and silent, her fingers curling around the edge of her desk, knuckles white. Her normally sharp posture seemed fragile, her sharp business suit feeling heavy on her shoulders as the weight of the crisis pressed down on her. She couldn't tear her eyes away from Malcolm. Every movement he made was deliberate, calculated. Every adjustment of a cable or twist of a knob seemed measured, purposeful. The faint scent of cleaning solution clung to his uniform, mixing oddly with the metallic tang of the server room. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat as she noticed how his fingers danced across the components, coaxing life back into machines that had moments before refused to obey. The bustling lobby beyond the server room felt muted to her, the chaos receding as if the universe had narrowed its focus onto this single figure. Her heartbeat raced not with panic this time, but with a fragile thread of hope. The air between them was thick with anticipation, punctuated only by the low hum and occasional beep of the electronic equipment. She pressed her lips together, holding herself rigid, her eyes flicking nervously to the blinking red lights that gradually shifted to green, signaling the slow return of functionality. Every flicker of light on the monitors drew a sharp gasp from her chest. Malcolm's movements were calm, almost meditative. He adjusted a loose cable here, reset a connection there, his touch confident, almost intimate with the machinery. Elizabeth's eyes followed each motion, silently urging him forward, her pulse synchronized with the rhythm of the humming service. She could hear the distant murmurs of employees and clients beyond the room, their tension mingling with hers. Yet it felt like a different world, a world outside the fragile bubble where Malcolm worked his quiet miracle. Then it happened. A small chime, almost delicate, echoed from the servers. One screen flickered, then another, until the bank's entire network blinked back to life. Lights on terminals illuminated, transactions processed automatically, and the persistent alarms that had screamed throughout the building fell silent. A collective sigh rose from the lobby, a chorus of relief, disbelief, and joy mingling together. Elizabeth's breath left her in a single, stunned exhale, and her hands fell to her sides as she stumbled slightly back from the desk, her eyes locked onto Malcolm, whose calm expression remained unchanged despite the triumph. His dark skin glistened slightly with the effort, the corners of his eyes crinkling faintly, but there was no grand gesture, no self-congratulatory smile. He simply closed the panel, straightened, and wiped a hand across his brow. Elizabeth felt her jaw slacken, her mind struggling to reconcile what she was witnessing. The entire IT team had been scrambling for hours, yet it was a janitor someone overlooked and underestimated who had restored order to the chaos. The hum of normal operations filled the room. Employees relieved chatter swelling around her. Clients, once impatient and angry, now whispered among themselves, wide-eyed with astonishment. Elizabeth's gaze followed Malcolm. He returned the small tools to his belt, his movements deliberate, measured, and unhurried. For the first time all morning, the weight pressing down on her shoulders lifted slightly. Replaced with awe and something else, recognition. She opened her mouth, about to speak, but no words came immediately. It was a moment of pure revelation. The calm, competent hands of a man dismissed by appearance had saved them all. The hubris and assumptions that had dictated her initial panic seemed trivial now. Elizabeth's eyes glistened as she finally found her voice, her tone both reverent and incredulous. "Malcolm, you did this," she whispered, almost to herself, as the lobby buzzed with the newfound normalcy. He simply nodded, his calm eyes meeting hers. A quiet acknowledgement that said more than words ever could dot in that instant. The bank and Elizabeth herself learned an unspoken truth. Sometimes, the most profound solutions come from the most unexpected people.
The lobby's once tense atmosphere had softened, replaced by a low hum of relieved chatter. Employees exchanged astonished glances, their earlier panic giving way to awe. Some quietly approached Malcolm, clapping a hand on his shoulder, murmuring words of gratitude and disbelief. "I can't believe you did this," whispered one teller, her eyes wide. Another shook his head, laughing nervously. "Man, you just saved our jobs." The air was electric, not with fear this time, but with admiration. Elizabeth remained frozen for a moment, the weight of shock still pressing down on her shoulders. Her high heels clicked lightly on the polished floor as she approached Malcolm, her gaze fixed on the calm, composed figure who had single-handedly resolved the crisis. Her usual air of authority seemed to falter, replaced by raw, unfiltered astonishment. The bank, which had moments ago teetered on the edge of chaos, now hummed with a quiet rhythm of restored normalcy, and she knew who was responsible. I don't know how to thank you," Elizabeth stammered, her voice unsteady. She reached out instinctively, almost as if physical touch could convey the magnitude of her gratitude. "You just saved the bank." "Saved all of us." Her usual sharpness was tempered by genuine humility, and the words hung in the air, weighted with emotion. Malcolm turned to her, his dark eyes calm and steady. A small, reassuring smile tugged at the corners of his lips, lines of age and experience softening his expression. "Sometimes it's just about knowing what to do, ma'am," he said quietly, his tone gentle yet confident. There was no boastfulness, no ego, only the understated pride of someone who had quietly stepped into a moment that demanded action. Around them, employees began to see him in a new light. Those who had barely noticed the janitor before, who had perhaps dismissed him as invisible or unremarkable, now approached with respect, One young teller leaned over and whispered, "I guess we underestimated him." Another employee nodded solemnly, muttering under her breath, "I'll never look at anyone the same way again." Even the customers, who had been on edge, exchanged impressed glances, murmuring comments like, "Wow, did you see that?" And "He's incredible." Elizabeth's mind raced as she watched the scene unfold. Her pride, once tied to control and authority, now mingled with humility. She realized that the hierarchy she had relied upon, titles, roles, appearances, meant nothing in the face of genuine skill and courage. Malcolm had shown her that value was not dictated by one's position or attire, but by knowledge, presence of mind, and willingness to act when it mattered most. She took a deep breath, letting the tension that had gripped her since the system crash slowly ebb. Her palms were still slightly sweaty, her chest rising and falling rapidly, but a calm began to settle over her. The sound of distant computer beeps, the hum of restored servers, and the soft murmur of grateful employees combined into a symphony of normalcy. And at the center of it all was Malcolm, serene and composed, the unassuming hero of the day. Finally, she spoke again, her voice firmer, steadier. "Malcolm, your actions today, they've reminded us all of what really matters. We owe you more than I can express." Her gaze held his, a mix of gratitude, respect, and newfound understanding. He simply nodded, as if the acknowledgement was enough. In that moment, the bank's dynamic subtly shifted. The staff now saw the janitor not as a background figure, but as an indispensable part of the team. Elizabeth, once defined by authority and control, began to grasp a larger lesson about humility and respect. The crisis had passed, but its imprint lingered, not just in restored systems, but in changed perceptions, deeper awareness, and the quiet admiration for someone who had been overlooked until his actions spoke volumes. As the employees returned to their desks, conversations buzzing with awe and laughter, Elizabeth remained by Malcolm's side, her earlier panic replaced with reflection. She realized that this day, marked by fear and uncertainty, had also brought clarity. Respect and recognition are earned through action, courage, and competence, not titles or appearances. And for once, the bank's CEO and her staff had seen that truth firsthand, in the quiet, steady hands of a man who had been underestimated by everyone but himself. The following morning, the bank buzzed with a renewed sense of energy, though the echoes of yesterday's chaos still lingered. Elizabeth Harper walked through the lobby, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, a determined yet thoughtful expression on her face. She had spent the night reflecting, replaying the events in her mind, the frozen screens, the alarms blaring, the panic in her staff's eyes, and the calm, precise hands of Malcolm Johnson, the janitor who had quietly restored order when everyone else had faltered. Gathering the employees for a mid-morning briefing, Elizabeth's usual commanding presence was now tempered by humility. Her voice carried a warmth and sincerity that drew the attention of every staff member. "Yesterday," she began, pausing to make eye contact with each person, "we faced a crisis that could have crippled our operations. And while many of you worked tirelessly to resolve it, there was one individual whose actions went beyond expectation. Malcolm Johnson stepped in, calm and skilled, and saved not just our systems, but our reputation." A murmur of astonishment rippled through the room. Eyes turned toward Malcolm, who stood quietly in his uniform, broom in hand, face composed yet betraying a small, humble smile. Some employees whispered among themselves, incredulous that someone they had seen only as a janitor possessed such capability. Elizabeth stepped closer to him. "Malcolm," she said, her voice steady, "I want to ensure that your contribution is recognized. Effective immediately, we are adjusting your role to include specialized technical responsibilities, along with the compensation and benefits that reflect the invaluable service you provide to this organization." The room fell silent, then erupted into applause. Malcolm's co-workers approached him with handshakes, pats on the shoulder, and heartfelt congratulations. The respect he had earned in moments transformed into lasting recognition, changing the dynamic in the bank entirely. Elizabeth exhaled slowly, a sense of relief and satisfaction washing over her. She realized that her previous notions of hierarchy and authority had been too narrow, too dependent on appearances and titles. Malcolm had reminded her, and all the staff, that true value isn't always visible at first glance. That day, she understood that humility, awareness, and appreciation for the contributions of every individual are fundamental to real leadership. As the employees returned to their duties with renewed motivation, Elizabeth took a quiet moment to approach Malcolm personally. "I want to thank you again," she said softly. "Not just for what you did yesterday, but for teaching me a lesson I needed to learn. True capability isn't determined by position or appearance. You've shown all of us the power of knowledge, calmness, and integrity." Malcolm nodded, his eyes meeting hers with quiet dignity. "I'm just glad I could help," he replied. "It's all anyone can really do. Use what they know to make a difference when it counts." In the following weeks, the culture within the bank subtly shifted. Employees began to see one another differently, paying more attention to the skills and potential that each person brought to the team. Elizabeth, once defined by her authority alone, became a more empathetic and perceptive leader. She personally ensured that all staff, from clerks to janitors, were valued, and she encouraged recognition and gratitude as part of the workplace ethos. The incident became more than a story about a system crash. It became a lesson, a reminder that heroism often comes from the most unexpected places. Elizabeth's perspective on leadership, respect, and merit had transformed, leaving an indelible mark on the organization. And Malcolm, once unseen, now stood as a living testament to the idea that excellence and courage are not measured by title, but by action, knowledge, and character. True leadership, Elizabeth realized, isn't just about directing others. It's about recognizing the power and worth of every individual, regardless of their role, and honoring those who step forward when it matters most.